What should people think about then when it comes to banking during and after a move?
Few things, and this kind of depends on your banking habits currently and how you prefer to have a relationship with the people you bank with and with your bank. There's, of course, so many online features and things like that now, but a few key things to evaluate. Does your current bank have branches or ATMs nearby to wherever you're moving? Welcome back to the Money and More podcast. I'm Madison Foster.
And I am Ryan Bowling. It's a pleasure to be here again. Today, we are talking about something that is a little banking adjacent, but a lot of people go through it at some point in their life. Today, we're talking about moving to a new city and what you need to know financially in order to do that. So, whether that's for a new job, school, fresh start, it's exciting, but also a little overwhelming when you think about all the financial implications that come with picking up your life, putting it into a moving van, and going someplace else. Madison, I feel like this is one of those things people think they're prepared for until they're actually in it.
Yeah, 100%. Moving sounds really exciting, and it is. Financially, it can really add up fast, and there's also, of course, some pieces of it that are less fun than others. And as far as the cost aspect, there are just so many little costs that people don't think about that really add up until you're kind of in it and spending the money. So that's part of what we're going to cover here today is making sure you're covered for those costs that some people may not consider.
Yeah, let's start there. What are some of the biggest costs people should expect when they're moving?
Yeah, so this is going to look a little bit differently for everyone, of course, based on your individual situation. But the biggest thing is just realizing how many categories of moving expenses there really are. So you have the obvious ones that everyone thinks about typically, like movers, a rental truck, maybe you're getting a U-Haul and kind of doing it yourself. But then you also can have hidden costs, and these are the ones that people typically overlook. So things like packing supplies, gas or mileage if you are driving yourself or family is helping you, hotels if it's a long distance move and there's maybe an interim period, storage units if the timing doesn't line up perfectly and there's a little bit of a buffer there, you may have to rent a storage unit for the bulk of your belongings, and even those smaller things can really add up.
Yeah, so this is one of those things I have a couple of experiences with. So a quick tangent, then I'll try to get us back on track. When I was a kid, my parents moved us from Texas to Missouri, and I have a distinct memory of not necessarily a U-Haul. It was a legitimate 18-wheeler that pulled up in front of the house that took easily 24 hours to load up. Of course, it was a caravan to get us from Texas up to Missouri, where my dad had taken a new position. So thinking back, I was 11 or 12 at the time. Just what that experience now that I'm an adult, what that would have been like for my parents, is just kind of mind boggling. Trying to put your whole life into that 18 wheeler, take it up the interstate, and then unpack it all when you got to the new place. And then as an adult, I've done that a little bit when I moved out of the house. Of course, it was not a interstate travel, but it was still an hour down the road. But that still comes into play whenever people think about what it takes to move. I moved as an adult out of the house when I started college and started life over there, and even those expenses. So one, as a kid, we had that 18 wheeler, and that's a huge expense. And then two, as an adult, not the same expense. You had a lot of help in getting your friends and your family to put stuff in the back of a pickup and uh, lay your seats down in your car and transport all your stuff up to college. But still, those are two, I think, pretty distinct ones. But would you say hiring movers versus doing it yourself, big decision financially for sure? Yeah.
It absolutely is. And I will just say, kind of to piggyback on what you said, my one experience moving, it wasn't super far. It was when I moved out of my childhood home with my dad, and he was the primary person that helped me. So he actually rented us a U-Haul trailer and he put it on the back of his truck and he hauled it. And then I followed him in my car, which was also loaded up. And I didn't move too super far. I knew I wanted out of my hometown, but to still be in the area for now. So we just went about 45 minutes or so. But we very much went like the DIY route and we did all of it, just the two of us. And then I had a couple friends that helped me secure like a dining room table and stuff on like Facebook Marketplace. I was a broke college student, so I was taking all of the secondhand stuff that I could get. So I've never had experience with movers, but even going through it that way, I could tell like it was certainly advantageous in some ways. And then there were some pieces of it that I was like, wow, if someone else was doing this for us, that would be handy. So that's kind of the catch 22 you face there, right? So hiring movers is really convenient. It could take a lot of the work off you, but it could also get expensive fast. If you're anything like me and have trust issues, it is hard trusting people, even though it is their profession, not to break all of your stuff. I mean, you may have antiques or ancestral pieces and just kind of trusting them to wrap it up and get it there safely. And then there's also additional fees that come with that service as well, depending on how far you're going and different aspects like fragile items. Sometimes they charge more for to wrap it, going upstairs, different things like that. Whereas DIY, it can absolutely save money, but again, it's more time consuming. You need to cover your own gas, your own labor time, things like that, and it's of course much more physically demanding on you. So
Yeah, so it's kind of a trade-off, I guess, that money versus stress.
it can be, yes.
Is there a good rule of thumb for budgeting, you think?
I would say so, yes. And this is a big one. What I would recommend is to always add an extra 10 to 15% buffer to whatever you anticipate your total move will cost, because something will come up, whether that is replacing something that broke, whether it was by you or a mover, last minute changes. If you do maybe have to get a hotel for one night, and you weren't planning for that. So 99% of the time, something's going to come up. So you should budget a little bit extra and have a cushion for that. And if something doesn't come up, then that's just an added bonus. You have some extra savings now to start off your move. So no matter what, it's going to benefit you to do that extra 10 to 15% buffer on top of whatever your expected budget for that is.
Awesome. Yes. All right. So switch gears just a little bit. You've made the move. Now you're actually living in the place that you've moved to. What should people think about in terms of their new cost of living?
Yes, this is where people can really get caught off guard because your expenses can change a lot depending on where you move, what part of the country you move to, how far you're going away from your original spot. And I think people don't often anticipate that or think that part through, just how vastly different it is, even just from coast to coast in the United States, the cost of living.
What are the biggest differences?
Housing is usually one of the biggest ones for sure. So rent and mortgage costs can vary dramatically depending on the city and the part of the country. But even different neighborhoods within the same city, especially the larger the city that you're in, can be very different. And then, of course, you have utilities, transportation, different tax amounts depending on the state. So those are all some as well to consider.
Yeah, taxes. That's a big one people forget, right?
Yes, and we would all love to forget it when it comes time, but there are some differences to consider again. So some states have no income tax, others have higher income tax or higher local taxes. Sales tax can also vary, which can of course impact your overall spending depending on how much sales tax is adding. So definitely important to prepare for that.
What would you say then is the best way to do that? What's the best way to prepare?
Yeah, well, first of all, definitely doing your research as far as cost of living differences. I recommend using a cost of living calculator. There are so many free ones available online. That's really helpful to do some comparison before you move when you are doing that research phase. So it helps you compare your current city to whichever city you are moving to so that you're not surprised if and when your budget shifts either direction.
Yes, especially when you're not super familiar with it, important to look it up.
Yeah.
So let's talk about housing a little bit more then, because that's such a huge part of moving, and there are a lot of upfront costs people don't always consider in their planning.
Yeah, and that's especially when renting, because with renting, you might have application fees, an initial security deposit. There's sometimes pet deposits. There's sometimes limitations on what pets you can have. So if you have like a large dog, for example, you may need to reevaluate if you're looking at certain apartments or houses for rent. And then those deposits that you do put down for a security deposit are often equal to 1 month's rent or higher. So that's something you
Yeah.
need to remember as well.
Oh, it adds up so quickly.
So quickly. And then with buying, it's still consideration, but it's just a different set of considerations there. So with buying a home, you have mortgage rates, property taxes, homeowners insurance, potential HOA fees if you do decide to live somewhere that is under the authority of a homeowners association, and then utilities, which is of course a big one. So with utility companies, you may need to put down a deposit just to start service depending on where you are and what company you go with. And costs for utilities can also vary greatly, depending on the area that you're in. Of course, if you're somewhere super hot and dry, you would probably anticipate a higher water bill, things like that. But the biggest thing I can say, whether you are moving into a new home, an apartment, if you are moving across the country or just down the road, always set up your utilities prior to move in day, if at all possible, so that you're not walking into a home with no power, most importantly, but no internet, those types of things. Make sure you get that prepaid and going up in advance so that when you do move in, that's one less thing you have to deal with.
That is excellent advice. The house my wife and I bought 2.5 years ago now, I forgot to set up our internet in advance, and it was a wait. It was an ordeal. I do not recommend moving into your house without having internet set up ahead of time. And then, of course, if this is the first episode you're listening to, we've talked in the past about utilities and how to save money in regards to that. So definitely go back a little bit and give that a listen. It was great advice in that area. So something I think a lot of people overlook after they've made the move, after they're set up in their house, they're ready to go, is banking. Of course, we live and breathe it all the time because that's what we do, but not everybody thinks about it.
Absolutely. And when you are just trying to make sure you have power on in your house, sometimes it can fall to the wayside, understandably. So, banking, so important to consider, and it can make a really big difference in your day to day life, especially if you are moving far away.
What should people think about then when it comes to banking during and after a move?
Few things, and this kind of depends on your banking habits currently and how you prefer to have a relationship with the people you bank with and with your bank. There's, of course, so many online features and things like that now, but a few key things to evaluate. Does your current bank have branches or ATMs nearby to wherever you're moving? There's also somewhat of a caveat to that. You can also check to see if there are in-network ATMs. So it might not be directly branded as your bank's ATM, but they're often a part of a larger network. Like OMB Bank, for example, is part of the MoneyPass network currently. So there are thousands of ATMs across the country, even though they might not all say OMB Bank, that you can access fee-free typically as well. But got to look into that. Got to look into fees. See if there are ATMs if you're going to need cash access, and if there are fees, that's something to consider. If there's out-of-network ATM fees with some of those or things like that. Do you have strong online and mobile banking tools? Because if you are wanting to primarily bank online and stick to where you're currently at, then that's of course going to be a necessity, is making sure that you are able to do all of the business and transactions that you need to do online. If you're no longer close to a physical branch, you can just walk into.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, it's a lot easier to switch banks than it has been in the past. I think generations, as they begin to age up, are more likely to do it. I know in my household, we are part of a couple of banks. I think that's getting more and more common to spread out your finances among multiple institutions. But if you even if you don't switch banks, I assume you got to at least evaluate it, right?
For sure. And, to some people, still having that community bank feeling or just having a local branch they can physically walk into if they need or want to is really important. And I don't fault you for that. So that may be something too. If you have a really great local community bank, but then maybe you're moving to the other side of the country or something and they don't have locations there, totally understandable if you still want a physical footprint there to, walk into, but definitely not a requirement. If you do switch though, like I said, local or community banks can be really helpful in a lot of ways. I mean, they're going to be rooted in wherever it is that you're moving to. It's not just going to be that huge corporate bank type feel. It's going to be people that actually like live, work, engage in the community that you're now a part of. So that can be really refreshing when you're kind of integrating somewhere new. And with that, they, of course, will typically have better insights into the local market. Sometimes they might have more competitive rates if they're able to offer that, just kind of depends. And with that, again, whether you go to a huge, large, nationally known bank or a community bank, if you do switch, make sure that you're also updating your address on bank accounts, credit cards, loans, as well as forward your mail and do a change of address with the United States Postal Service so that you don't miss statements or run into security issues. And that's whether you switch banks or you don't switch banks, because whether you're staying with your current bank, you're going somewhere new, they need to know where to find you, how to reach you, and where to send you those important pieces of documents. So,
Yeah, I remember when I was first getting started in banking and learning about how banks operate, it became pretty clear to me that the large national mega banks are nice on one hand because you tend to have state of the art apps. Your debit cards look really cool and slick, and you feel kind of safe and comfortable. But at times a number, but then at a community bank, uh, it became pretty aware to me that you're supporting local businesses because community banks have different lending that they do. And a lot of it is to small business. So when you put your deposit dollars into a community bank, you are supporting local small businesses in a way that national banks don't because their lending limits are so much larger. So they're primarily supporting, some of these large national corporations. And so they hit the different niches differently, and that's something I discovered pretty early on in my banking career, and it's why we spread ourselves out now so that we can take advantage of all of that stuff. So there's also just a lot of non-financial tasks that come with moving, right? So outside of banking and the cost and all of that, what are some of those considerations?
there are just so many. So, you'll want to update things like driver's license, vehicle registration, insurance policies. With insurance, surprise, your insurance rates might actually go up or down as well, depending on your new location. So that's another thing to think about when you are doing that budget planning. And then also, of course, finding new home bases for things as far as a new primary care physician, a new hospital to be established at, dentists, any other services that you take advantage of regularly. If you're someone that gets your hair done, you might have to find that new salon that's not gonna go crazy. Like there's just a lot of things to figure out and get kind of reestablished when you do move. So those are all things to consider as well. And it's really helpful, I think, to talk to locals or to look up local reviews of people that have actually visited those businesses or that have seen a certain doctor or gone to a certain dentist. And then you can get kind of some real world feedback from people in the community that you're now living in and working in and kind of make some informed decisions when you are kind of shopping around as to where you want to maybe set up.
Yeah, you wouldn't think about it, but hairstylist actually kind of important to me when, I get my hair cut like every 3 to 4 weeks. I have to go frequently. So that
Well,
that sort of thing matters to me.
yeah, me too. Probably different reasons, but me too.
Absolutely. I'm glad you get it. So we talk a lot on this podcast about building a financial safety net and how important that is. So let's talk about financial stability after the move. What should people have in place?
Yes. This one somewhat pained me to write about just because I want to just be very clear that I am also definitely suggesting you have this in place prior to the move, even if you're not planning on moving. It's just good to have as a general rule of thumb. But the biggest thing, if you are moving, to have built up and there for a cushion is an emergency fund. Ideally,
Mhm.
3 to 6 months of living expenses. And by living expenses, I mean rent, utilities, bills, groceries, gas, like truly that you can live off of for 3 to 6 months if necessary. Because when you move, you might be changing a job. Things can take time to stabilize. Again, prices of things or your utilities or different things like that can increase. And then unexpected expenses can and will come up. You maybe if you have decided to move yourself and you've taken your car on a cross country road trip, now it's time to service that car. Or maybe there's some fun knocking in the engine that wasn't there before that you have to get addressed. So preparing for all of those things can make it as stress free as it possibly can be when you're already going through a lot of change.
Yeah, I will add that hopefully, if you're moving, it was because you got a nice promotion, some sort of pay increase, you're taking a new job. So take that opportunity to reanalyze what your 3 to 6 months looks like for your new pay rate, not what your old pay rate was. You may need to adjust it if you're, you were able to move up on the ladder. You're making more money. Your maybe your mortgage or your rent payment went up after you moved. So take a quick glance at what an actual 3 to 6 months looks like and adjust your emergency fund accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So overall, moving to a new city, very exciting, but definitely more than just packing boxes. Putting stuff in that U-Haul or that 18-wheeler and hitting the road.
Yeah, it's a full financial and lifestyle transition. One thing I will say, kind of like I touched on earlier, as far as getting recommendations, it's really important to build a local network. And if you're not the most social person, and that sounds terrifying, totally get it. But even if it's just little things here and there, like I have a brother that got a new car a while back. He's obsessed with it. So he joined a bunch of car groups. I have another brother that is really into a certain board game. So he has a group for that at school. I have friends that are in book club and go to self-defense classes. I joined a gym. So no matter where you are, how big or small, or how specific your interests are, you can kind of find your people, whether it's personally or professionally, to kind of network. And those things can really blossom. It can lead to new friendships, job opportunities. It can help you find resources as you are trying to get those resources in a place you're probably unfamiliar with. And it just kind of makes the transition smoother overall. So if you are able to kind of find those people or those businesses that can maybe help you kind of make it smoother, I would definitely recommend that. And then again, with the financial piece as well, plan ahead, budget realistically, and prepare yourself for those hidden costs that will arise. And then you can make the move truly a positive experience for you.
Yeah, and then you actually get to enjoy the fun part, exploring your new city and your community.
Exactly. Then that's the goal. So I think that is going to do it for today's episode. Ryan, thank you so much as always. Give us a like and a follow, comment any future episodes you would like to see, and we will see you next month. Bye.
All right. See ya. Bye.
The Money and More podcast is owned by OMB Bank. OMB and its affiliates do not provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. You should consult your legal and/or tax advisors before making any financial decisions.